We are live, gang, and I'd like to welcome everyone to the April 14th meeting of the El Dorado Hills Area Planning Advisory Committee. I'm the chair, John Davey. Tonight, Brooke Washburn, our secretary, is here. John Raslier, vice chair. Tim White, vice chair. So this is a new environment tonight for us because traditionally we had used a pro-level version of Zoom. We had an unfortunate incident in February, which is apparently not the month of love for Zoom. But to that end, we've switched to a webinar version so that invited panelists have access to speak and share. And as we get through the meeting, when there's opportunities for attendees to provide comment or questions, we'll ask you to raise your hand or well, there Josh is in right now, sorry. We'll ask people to raise their hand to join into the conversation, and we do ask that when you're done with your questions that you mute yourself, so we're not talking over each other. So I'm going to, he said, let me grab this real quick, and I'm going to grab that, and there we go. So here we are on scene again. Call the meeting to order with the adoption of our meeting agenda. If there are no objections from any of the APAC officers, I think we have a pretty simple agenda tonight, so pretty straightforward. And so seeing no objections, we're going to move forward. As we open the meeting, we allow an opportunity for public comment to attendees of the meeting that are matters that are not on the agenda tonight. So we really only have a handful of topics. So if you have a public comment that is not part of the agenda, then go ahead and push the raise hand button on your Zoom. I see Robert's got his hand up. I'm going to call him in a minute. And then for callers, you press *9 on your phone. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get Robert in here. Robert, thank you for coming tonight. If you unmute yourself, you should be able to speak.
Hey, thank you, John.
Awesome.
And committee members. I may be jumping ahead of myself on this, and this might be an item that the good supervisor will address today. But yesterday's board meeting of the Board of Supervisors addressed a resolution or a proposed resolution designating green zones. And there was a great number of people on that call that expressed a lot of different concerns. And I believe the supervisors made the correct decision in tabling the discussion until further clarification could be set forth on this resolution. But again, I just encourage the supervisor to maybe update the rest of the committee on what took place yesterday and what this resolution is all about. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Robert. What we'll do is that when we get to Supervisor Heidal's portion of our agenda, if he has some feedback for that, we'll allow him to share what he needs to share with us. I know that he's posted something on his office's social media accounts and with some good information about what happened yesterday in terms of how the board approached that matter. So looking at that, are there any other public comments for matters that are not on our agenda tonight? Who was the last one? I just missed one. I'm sorry. It just went away. There it is. Bob, let me get you real quick. Bob, if you go ahead and unmute, you should be ready to go.
Hi, thank you. And again, Robert talked on this item a little bit. I am trying to have an understanding. Sorry, my Alexa's telling me there's somebody at my front door. I hate when they interrupt me. Sorry about that. I did see the posting by Supervisor Heidal. Are we going to be talking on this later, and should I reserve any comments or questions for that later? But I didn't see it on the agenda, or is this the appropriate time for that?
When Supervisor Heidal addresses APAC with his information for the meeting, if he has information he can share about that, I'm sure he'll provide it.
So we can discuss it then. Thank you,
Yeah.
Bob.
And I'll be able to chime in with questions at that time.
Yeah, and we got to keep on track. But yeah, well, any questions? Supervisor Heidel has time, and if we have enough time in our meeting tonight, we'll provide that opportunity to ask questions and get some dialogue. But we really want to keep focused on what his initial presentation is, and then the rest of our agenda for tonight. So, and I know that there will be an opportunity at the community council meeting on May 3rd, prior to the board of supervisor hearing on the 4th, that Supervisor Heidel will likely be addressing that matter somewhat too. So that matter is a couple of weeks out, but we'll have opportunity to discuss a little bit tonight and probably more detail next week or in May.
Oh, okay, well, it was one of the questions actually may have been for the group as a whole anyway. There was a mention in Supervisor Heidel's posting that there was a recommendation from this group, but I didn't understand what the recommendation was unless the recommendation was for approval of this Green Means Go initiative.
No, and I'll let Supervisor Heidel respond because he has, he was at the meeting. I was in and out of it.
Right, so he's referring to the APAC letter that
Yeah.
was written, because I did reference that the decision made by the board was consistent with APAC's recommendation to continue it and do further discussion. That was what the reference was, John. I think you're familiar with that.
Yeah.
Thank you. That cleared it up. Appreciate it.
Okay, that was easy. All right. With that, I see no more hands up. We're going to go ahead and jump ahead in our presentation tonight. So Supervisor Heidel, guess what? It's your turn to shine. You're the next item on our agenda tonight, and Supervisor Heidel is going to provide some information about recent happenings at the county level and provide some feedback for El Dorado Hills residents.
All right, so I have 3 items, and we can take as much time as the chair will allow us, but let's start with agenda item 20 from Tuesday's Board of Supervisors meeting. I did put out a post on social media. We're distributing that back to people who submitted emails. Some of you have read it, obviously, but the bottom line of the whole thing is staff did not do an adequate job, in my opinion, of defining what the project was really all about. The maps were thrown together in a manner that was not consistent with what we want to see as a board. So we directed staff to go back and to rewrite portions of the resolution and to address the maps to be consistent with where we think infrastructure improvements in El Dorado County, if we get grant monies from the state, would be helpful in advancing certain communities. And there's 3 areas that were shown in the maps for those of you familiar. El Dorado Hills was one area. Cameron Park, Shingle Springs area was another one. And then Diamond Springs, El Dorado was the 3rd area. So 3 maps. But that's where it created a lot of confusion because the map of El Dorado Hills included areas of the Central El Dorado Hills specific plan, even to the point it included the Pedregal section, which is totally separate and across the roadway from El Dorado Hills Boulevard. And I think that was done in error. That's not an intent to try to induce growth. It doesn't mean anything related to the central project. The motivation of staff was to see if the community and the board would be interested in submitting a grant application to put in a pedestrian bike path overcrossing for Highway 50 that would connect town center with the backside of Rayleigh's. No matter what's at the backside of Rayleigh's, that's an important connectivity for trails, pedestrians, all those kinds of things. So county staff has been talking to relative developers and other things about it for many years. It's going to be a very costly project, but if we could get several $1 million from SACOG in this grant program, the pilot grant program, that would be feeder money to come in with other monies that probably have to come from the Transportation Commission to do that. But that's not the only project that's being considered. That's one of potentially 3 or 4 significant projects the county would like to look at. So staff is supposed to go back, adjust the map, change the resolution. We'll have a chance to review it because it'll be posted on Legistar at least 5 days before the board meeting on Tuesday. We'll be able to discuss it Monday night at our community council meeting as stated. But the way I look at this, some people don't recognize that SACOG has multiple responsibilities. My first involvement with SACOG, I think, was like John Razzler's, the SACOG Metropolitan Transportation Planning document. That's not housing, that's transportation. It's about roadways and transit and various other things. So to think that SACOG's responsibilities are limited to housing is in error. They have multiple responsibilities and there are multiple counties. There's 6 counties and there's 23 cities. That's all described in the email post that I put out. But that's the bottom line of it. I'd be happy to address questions. I would encourage people to go read the email. We've included a link to the Legistar database on the county website that'll give you, hopefully in a day or 2, that full video. You can listen to the comments yourself. You can interpret it yourself. Our supervisor, Wendy Thomas, District 3, is the board's representative on SACOG. She speaks in that narrative about her view of it, why she thinks it's important. The city of Placerville has signed up. They see benefits of it. And then we also had James Corliss, who's the executive officer from SACOG, join in the conversation and make his comments to it. So there's a lot of flexibility in how we apply for this application to be eligible for grants. And that's what we're asking staff to tailor it to. And in my opinion, if they don't tailor it properly, then the answer is no, I'm not interested. But if we can bring grant money, which is our tax dollars that we pay California state taxes, back to our community to make infrastructure improvements in terms of bikeways, pedestrian walkways, equestrian trails, whatever it may be, to me, that's something we need to pursue. But the bottom line is the legislation may never get approved this year. It failed last year. The legislation may never get the governor's signature. The legislation may never be funded. There's a lot of ifs to get through before we would ever see the potential to even apply for a grant. But unfortunately, the way the legislation was written, you have to get in the game early because they're using that as initiative to try to convince the state legislature to fund this small pilot project, which is just SACOG. And to my knowledge, there's no other COGs, communities of governments across the state of California that are applying for similar money. And we know that LA and San Diego and everybody else is interested in this same kind of infrastructure. So it seems like Assemblyman McCarty got a little ahead of the game, but if he gets this funded, that's going to start other things. So it's trying to bring some of our tax dollars back to the community and help with infrastructure improvement is the way I view it. But if it isn't set up right, if it's overly regulatory, if it doesn't make sense, we won't file for a grant. That's the way I view it. At least I won't vote to file for a grant. So hopefully that's enough discussion without question. So
I have a question, but not a question, a comment, I should say. Number one, the maps that were given to us are very poor.
Agree.
You have no idea what's going on, where you are in that map. So I hope they'll improve the maps, number one. And number two, do we really know what our residents want insofar as bike and pedestrian pathways? Do they want a bridge? Will they use a bridge? Those are things that we have to find out.
Right.
And
the CSD and other agencies have done surveys, including the Transportation Commission, and trails is the number one thing that comes back. So people want trails more than anything. But I think bike paths are related to trails because they connect with trails, right? And I'm talking about off-road type of trails, the motocross type of bicycles, those kinds of things, the off-road, that's what people really want access to, number one. So there is surveys that have been done, John. It says there is an interest. That's why the Transportation Commission actually did planning for it.
of
Yeah,
course,
and I'm sitting on the CSC Master Plan Advisory Committee for this year as they revisit their master plan, and trails and connectivity between bike trails and walking paths is absolutely the number one request of residents. So I know the Transportation Commission looks at that pretty closely as well. Tim, your hand's up if you have a question, jump on in.
Yeah. Hey, John. Look, I don't think anyone wants to leave taxpayer money that we can get into El Dorado Hills or El Dorado County on the table. I just think that I got to give the DOT about a D on this particular project.
Yeah.
I think that when you look at the presentation that was presented in the legislative package, there was nothing about a pedestrian bridge. It was all about the business center and what was not the business, the business area. There was nothing about it. And then when Raphael started talking about it, there was a disconnect between what I think was trying to be accomplished and what the public information that was provided that we as residents could access. And giving the timing of it and stuff, people got worried that this was some sort of a backdoor. Having read your explanation, having had a chance to have discussions with people, I now understand where it was coming from. But really, you have been an advocate for transparency at the board level since you've been elected, since you were elected 5.5 years ago. And this was a case where the staff did not live up to the expectations that we as citizens have for them. So that's all I'm going to say. Thank you.
I agree with you 100%. I think the full board would. We were very disappointed. I will tell you that DOT has been understaffed for a long time. They're trying to hire civil engineers and people to fill the positions where people have left. And they've had 3 failed recruitments. So they're operating with less than full staff, trying to do the best they can. And that's not an excuse, it's just reality, right? So yeah, it was not done well. And I'll leave that, you know, because some of the people particularly involved with this basically have 2 full-time jobs they're trying to do right now because it's vacant. You know, we can't fill the positions because we don't pay competitive salaries in El Dorado County. We're a training ground, and people leave and they go to Placer County, Sacramento County, wherever, after they have that skill set developed. So, I mean, that's the reality of the way El Dorado County operates. So,
Okay.
Can I
Bob,
ask one quick? Oh, sorry.
Okay. Brooke, I'll let, actually, John's after Bob. Bob wants to ask a question, then John Richard, then Brooke will have it. So, Bob, if you're ready.
Yes, thank you. So John, I appreciate your explanation. I know you've worked hard for the community for quite some time, and I certainly trust in that. Where I'm struggling is we talk about these great things that we'd all love to have, the bike trails, pedestrian bridges and pathways. Those are all great. And yet buried inside those documents, in the board document, it talks about extremely low, very low, and low income housing, exceptions to board items that would control how much, the low density, or excuse me, the high density housing. And it also talks about development of mass transit. All those things we absolutely don't want. So my question to you, is this true?
We have a transit system. I'll take transit as an exception. We have a transit system in El Dorado County, and it's used by a lot of residents in the more rural areas to get to El Dorado Hills. So I think that is important linkage. I mean, we don't need mass transit per se, but we do have a transit authority. We have transit buses. And the services they provide, they've just opened a service that can take you all the way from downtown Sacramento with a pickup in El Dorado daily basis. So those kinds of services I've had requests for in the past, particularly for our seniors who don't want to drive anymore, but they want to go visit somebody that lives in an area that they can get on a transit bus and commute to. So, if they're mobile, I mean, that's a big part of it. But so, yeah, the housing is indirectly tied to this, because we're also doing the RENA evaluation, which is a requirement by the state to update our forecast for very low housing, very low income housing, low income housing, moderate and above moderate. And we're trying to meet all of those values that SACOG provided to us. So part of this infrastructure does support future activities related to that. But this loan, these grant monies in and of themselves do not facilitate that. They're not tied to that directly. It's an indirect association at this point. And the last thing I believe we want to see is something like SB 35 be done with these things, where the state decides to take over our discretionary control on land use. Because if we don't build some affordable housing, I think that's what's going to happen. So we could have a long discussion over that, pros and cons. I'm always open to ideas and inputs. I never close my mind on what those things are, because it's a dynamic situation, constantly changing.
Help me to understand how we develop low-income housing and large amounts, like we're talking about Creekside Village and Carson Creek Villages over here on Latrobe. You're talking about 1,800, 2,000 homes that they're talking about putting in. And how do we put, first of all, nothing's going to be low income if you build it over here. I don't care what you build here. The new apartments that we just built in town center are not going to be low income. They're going to be high rent districts.
Absolutely.
And so you're not going to get low income.
Apartment complex, that's not ownership. Right?
I understand.
We're talking about what's referred to as the missing middle, which is workforce housing, which is going to be in a moderate housing level at the best, and probably above moderate in some cases. We're never going to be able to achieve within this area, in my opinion, very low income housing, with the exception of Section 8 federal projects. We know we have one in El Dorado Hills already, but with the exception of that kind of housing, which the state may require, we're not going to get it to fit within the descriptions of what we want with mixed use in various areas that put jobs and residency within the same area, so you don't have to get in your car and drive.
But my question is, how do you create a situation where you increase, just in our area alone over here where I live in Blackstone, how do you increase 2,000 residences right there on Latrobe and expect to reduce greenhouse gas? You're effectively creating 3,000 more commuters. So you're now clogging Latrobe, you're clogging White Rock Road, and you're clogging the 50 freeway.
Are
You're
you
not
referring to
reducing
development-
greenhouse gas.
So Bob, are you referring to development within a business park or further expansions of what is Valley View, which is behind Blackstone? Which are you referring to?
All the above, because in addition to that, if I could, in addition to what we're talking about doing here in El Dorado Hills, we are literally, half a mile from 11,000 brand new houses, 25,000 new residents at Folsom. They're going to clog our freeways. We're not reducing greenhouse gas in any way, shape, or form. We're increasing it. And so I don't understand how we can even say that this is a
We can have a
greenhouse
long
gas
discussion. We
initiative.
really ought to talk about vehicle miles traveled and the way the state is imposing those things, because they are changing the ground rules on CEQA approvals relative to greenhouse gas generation. It's a very detailed, complex subject. Be happy to spend a lot of time talking to you about it. I'm not sure this is the right place to dig into that, that
I
area.
drive 2 electric cars, so I don't have an issue.
Okay. All right.
And
well,
as a matter of fact, we probably have a larger electric vehicle ownership in all of the county in El Dorado Hills alone.
yeah. But the greenhouse gas designs, a lot of them are for the housing itself, because the way they manufacture houses now, the equipment they install is to avoid generation of greenhouse gases. And they have numbers that show 20, 35% reduction in housing that's built today in terms of greenhouse gas emissions compared to what they were a decade ago.
Well, all the homes in Blackstone have solar.
Yes, right. And that's part of it, right? Solar self-generation, but not all of El Dorado Hills and not all of El Dorado County has that same amenity. So we're talking about a countywide initiative, not just focused on, a subdivision or a sub-region of a given district. So,
But this green zone is all of El Dorado Hills. It really is El Dorado Hills. Why isn't that up towards Tahoe? There aren't any up there. Why are they here? Why did they pick this area?
when we look at well, first of all, Tahoe is primarily controlled by TRPA, TRPA regulations. It's not controlled so much by the county as is it TRPA and growth and everything else. So they have an overriding body that determines what can happen in terms of new building construction, those kinds of things, which is much more stringent than anything we have in the remainder of El Dorado County. So it's a different environment when you get over the divide into Tahoe. So again, we can talk about that separately, but.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and jump in. So we spent a lot of time on this, but we do have 4 people that have been waiting a long time. If we can make the questions quick, John Richard, I know he's been online for a while. John, if you can unmute yourself, and then let's keep it as brief as we can so we can move on to our guest tonight.
Okay, I'll be real brief. John, when the motion was, or when it was continued yesterday, it wasn't clear to me the exact direction that was given to staff. I think the direction was to make the resolution more consistent with the comments. And so my question specifically is, do you expect that the central El Dorado Hills specific plan area will be removed from that map, except for the area right behind Rayleigh's, where Martinez suggested that the whole thing was included to allow for the landing of a footbridge? Because
Yes, the answer is yes. That's my expectation. If it isn't, I probably won't approve it because there's an inference there that's inaccurate. It's not what they're trying to provide housing incentives for Central El Dorado Hills specific plan. That's not what this is intended to do. So the map was very poorly prepared. I agree with that.
Okay, I just want to make sure that, it didn't seem like staff had super clear direction on that detail, so.
Well, and it's going to come back to the board for review before it even gets posted on Legistar, because I've already got a meeting set up with them so that I want an advanced view of what they end up with. But we needed to give them enough time to really prepare that. And one of the things I think that helps us a little bit is Natalie Porter, who's the lead engineer on this, is a resident of El Dorado Hills. So it's not like she lives in South Lake Tahoe and knows nothing about the community. So I think she
Thanks, John.
understands it a little bit better now, what we need. So, yeah.
Brooke, you've been waiting a long time, and then we have one more after you.
Okay, just real quick. Has anyone looked at the legal implications of what that green zone designation would have on the current zoning ordinance or current designations?
County Council has looked at all of that, and they have advised us that there's nothing in this particular grant program that obligates us to anything, because again, this is the first gate of many. Once the grants are announced, we can make a determination with public input and stuff that we're going to apply for a grant or we're not. right?
Perfect.
You can either be
Yeah.
a team player or not. So
I just wanted to know if anybody had looked at that exact question, like, is there any superstition? Like, does it supersede an original designation? Would it convert an open space to something else?
I'm not sure county council went to that depth, but they look at things fairly thoroughly with respect to what is this particular board measure? How could it be impeded or somehow obstructed or create lawsuits associated with what the action is? They are very conservative, as you may know, Brooke. So
Yeah.
we have to ask David Livingston or somebody on his team if they looked at the specific part of it you're talking about. And my guess is they're going to say, well, no, but we don't anticipate anything there. But before the board would ever apply for a grant, we will make sure we go through all this. My guess is there's about a 35% chance that this legislation will even get out of Congress or get out of the state legislative cycle. Last year it failed. I don't see a lot of initiative for people to want to put money into the SACOG area only. If there are other cogs involved, I can see maybe that could happen, but so I don't have high speculation this is going to get funded. Unfortunately, if you don't get in the game now, you don't get to play later.
So then the next question real quick, is there any way to add any areas? Because I think the Saratoga, especially if they are going to add the additional freeway entrance and exit, would qualify as an infill / metropolitan hub. And we could really benefit from having trails, sidewalks, what have you in that area.
That would probably take a remapping, because what the map is supposed to do, you probably understand, is be inclusive of the areas that would be eligible, right?
Right.
And that's what they're going to review when they look at, is this a suitable preset application, so to speak, for this particular area? So we would have to expand the map to include the Saratoga area. I doubt if staff is going to want to take on the ambition to try to do that at this point, given the fact they have to come back May 4th. But I'm hopeful this isn't the final time we have a chance to make adjustments. I don't know the requirements, but once we submit the maps and they basically accepted those, I don't know that we can't possibly modify some of the maps when we get closer to that actually grant application. Obviously, much more public input, so I just don't know.
The resolution did have, it did speak of an opportunity to revisit the zone areas. So I'm going to move on to Terry, and then we're going to be done with this because we've got to get moving. So Terry, if you would unmute yourself, please supply your question.
Okay, so you said that the staff didn't do a very good job yesterday, but I think for people like myself, I didn't get to watch the whole thing yesterday. I watched part of it. But I went to the original Creekside meeting, and it was made very clear by Wendy Thomas, yourself, and I think at the time it was Vanderkamp, but that it was about the low-income workforce housing, talking about putting 800 units on 200 acres, and that it was going to be a walking and biking community, that they would work in the business park and, bike. There is no way to bike up Latrobe. I mean, you can go part way, but you can't go all the way.
We're talking about connectivity within the business park. You don't even have to go out to Latrobe Road. And that's one of the trail systems that are being put in and planned. And that's what.
Okay, so go ahead. Sorry. At that time, they said it was going to be, I don't remember the exact wording, but like their wildland trail would meet up with our regular trail. So basically that meant dirt, which is not what people want to begin with if they're going to be doing all that. But second, it doesn't take into consideration, like Bob said before, the fact that so we have all these roads, and down by where some of the stuff would be, it is one lane in each direction. We have the Heritage, which is still building. We have the one that's on top of Blackstone. We have the new apartments, which haven't even begun to fill up yet, with cars and everything else. We have not enough schools. Are they going to be building more schools with that? So I think it's a matter of, if we were to have one of these fires that we've had, we've been lucky so far. How would we get out? I mean, there's so many people that you're trying to cram into a small place. I think what some of people aren't getting is that most of the people who live here now don't want it to be a big city. When you said the over ramp thing to walk over, sure, that would be nice. But if you actually come down and look, plenty of people walk under the overpass when they want to get over to Rayleigh's. The next thing is with the workforce housing, both grocery stores that are here are high end. They've got Rayleigh's closed right now because it's going to turn itself into Rayleigh's, but into a Whole Foods type of Rayleigh's. So the only thing you then have is Target, which is fine. But then you have, again, all of the apartments that are there that are not lived in yet. You have, you know, you're talking about.
I got an update on the apartment that there's 600 applications for the 212 apartment rooms.
Yes. So, and I'm guaranteeing you most of those will have 2 cars. And it's just like when they said with this housing that they're going to do, it would be walking and biking. Now, we all know that that's not true. They can put it out there all they want, but so that's going to mean most likely 2 cars per household. And it's already a mess. I mean, so you're going to have people coming from this side of Latrobe to the other side of 50 Latrobe, and all of that traffic is going to be meeting in the middle there somewhere, and it's just going to take away everything what people live up here for. What we've learned from COVID is when you live in a packed community, you get sick. It's not, it really is upsetting, because even for myself, I have a son that's 28, he's in a wheelchair.
Okay.
If we have all of these issues going on and you cannot get out of the area that you need to because you're packed, we have a lot of elderly up here. We have a lot of retired up here. Some of them are not going to be able to get out, say, if we have a fire, and I'm hoping we never do, but you know, you don't know, because the state's had plenty of them so far. There's a million other things I could say, but I just think that if you aren't understanding, for some of the people who went to the first meeting for that, it's still on your the county's website. If you go and look and hear what they said there, you will understand why the rest of us feel the way that we feel about this. Because again, do we really want to come and see this thing over the freeway, you know, the walking thing to get from one side to the other? I don't even know if people on the other side are going to want that, because that's going to bring tons of people, you know, over there. I just don't see where it gets. And right now, what kind of businesses would they bring into?
Let me make a suggestion here, John Davey. When you get a free month, let's have a discussion about the county general plan and where the plan growth is planned for. Because we live in a community region, including Blackstone. This is where a large measure of the plan growth in the general plan is written. So I'm sorry if you didn't understand that when you bought into the property, but a lot of that plan.
You're talking about rezoning right now. You're not talking about anything that was in the plan before. I already know what the plan is, but not what you're talking about doing is taking that away and adding to it. Just like in the beginning of Blackstone, in the front there, that was supposed to be some storefronts or something, and automatically somewhere 80 to 100 more houses came in there. And so I lived in Hatfield Bay for a long time. And let me tell you, I know once they start something, it just continues to get bigger and bigger.
Because Valley View, if you know what the Valley View specific plan is, if you're familiar with that, it's a lot more than
on top of us. Yeah.
And that is housing that's going to be developed. It is pre-approved.
100%, but you're talking about adding to that. And we haven't even seen what's already in the plan. And you're adding this other stuff that's going to make this one particular area so
what's in the plan. Let's have the discussion.
Yeah. Okay. So what I'm going to suggest, and I thank you, John, for that suggestion, is that there's a couple of topics I would like to have single focus meetings about. General plan would be one.
Yep.
I would also like to have transportation come in and talk about the changes to the CIP, to the new TIF program. Natalie Porter, we'll talk later at the end of our meeting. Natalie Porter had a very good presentation from the Planning Commission about the VMT implementation and the traffic demand model. So those are would probably have to be standalone focus meetings. If we could schedule a second meeting in a month, we'll do it. So, but we'll talk to those agencies and see what we can make available, and then we'll invite the public to.
Because I think it truly, people need to understand the way the general plan is put together. That's what I have to operate to, is consistency with the general plan. That's what developers have to meet. If we want to change the general plan, then let's start a process to change the general plan. But I have not heard anybody come up with that demand as of yet. So good discussion. Can I make 2 quick comments, John, if you've kind of closed out on this?
Yeah, we need to get moving. So John, if you can finish up.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
And thank you, Terry. So on Monday, April the 26th, 5:30 to 7:30 p.m., We are going to be co-sponsors. The county's going to be a co-sponsor on mobile home parks and talking about what's happening with affordable housing, the rents, long-term leases with affordable, with the mobile home parks. That's going to be held at the Union Mine High School, but it will be a hybrid communications. It'll be in their a presentation center, so people can come and attend, but it's always also going to be by Zoom. So if you know anybody that lives in the mobile home park in El Dorado Hills or other areas that's interested in, that's April 26, 5:30 to 7:30. The second thing I want to let everybody know is at yesterday's meeting as well, we got approval by the board to do a major improvement on El Dorado Hills Boulevard between Green Valley Road and Harvard Boulevard. It's a 2.5 mile section. That work will start this fall and it will continue, it'll be ditching and brushing, go into next year when it gets resurfaced. But that's the first phase of a 2-phase step to improve El Dorado Hills Boulevard. The PCI, the pavement condition index, is 71. That's ripe for getting major monies to do rehabilitation, restoration before it deteriorates. So we're qualified there. The issue is there just isn't enough money coming from SB1 and other state sources for road maintenance, but we're doing the best we can. So there's a map in there of the 5 different districts. We got 2.5 miles of roadway on El Dorado Boulevard. Most of the other districts got like 4 or 5 miles because it's not a 4-lane road. It's a 2-lane road they're improving. And those are in the other sections of the district, so other sections of the county. So again, we're getting some money back towards road maintenance from our gas tax. I want to make people aware of that. And that's it.
Well, hey, thank you for entertaining all these questions tonight and answering to the best of your ability. We look forward to hearing how, that agenda item number 20, how it gets revisited and what the board sees when they see it on the 4th, and look forward to hearing about it at the El Dorado Hills Community Council meeting on the 3rd of May. So I'm gonna go ahead, jump
John,
over here. Yes?
John, may I have my hand up? I just wanted to add a quick clarification, if I may.
It was real quick, yeah.
Really quick. What Terry was alluding to, and I think many residents are aware of and are concerned with, is, John, we completely understand the Valley View plan. We've all looked at the plans. What we're talking about are where we start deviating from the plan and we start doing J6 general plan amendments, such as what we're doing for Carson Creek Village and Creekside Village. And those are the issues that are concerns to us, not the general plan. We understand the general plan. It's those when we try to make amendments to the general plan to add additional residences that is outside the general plan.
Oh, if we want to talk about housing, there's another thing called inclusionary housing. There's a lot of different things the county is considering right now as part of our RENA update in terms of that housing element. So again, we're going to have more conversation on that. My understanding is starting in July or August. So we will have board meetings and a lot of public input on RENA and what it means in terms of the various forms of affordable housing, not necessarily low-income housing, which gets to be a confusing factor with people. They cross-mix affordable housing with low-income housing. The state uses affordable housing for 4 categories of housing. Again, very low income, moderate income, and above moderate income is the state vernacular for affordable housing. So thank you.
But we will have an opportunity to visit those projects as they come along, and a lot of the members of the audience tonight are interested in participating, so we're grateful for that. So with that, I thought the oops, let me get this over here. Go here. Sorry, I'm going to grab this just so we can update everyone, so everyone can see this. So our guest tonight, the next part of our agenda is Josh Panay from Panay Associates, and we're going to have another discussion to generate some more community feedback regarding the Mohana Development Company's potential event center, hospitality, mixed-use residential development concept. We talked about this in January, and their team's back tonight with more information about the project. And Josh, if you're ready, if you'd like to share your screen, you should be able to do so now. I'm trying to make sure.
Thank you, John. Josh Panay here. Hello, everyone. I think Michael Espinelli is going to share his screen and we'll go through this. Let's see, Michael, do you have that slideshow up? This will be a brief slideshow. You'll see kind of some new information. You know the project site. We appreciate everyone's looking, and we've had a lot of good public input. The project site is Bass Lake Road at the foot, right at Highway 50. What we're showing here is the yellow is the bike paths that are in the county right now. We don't have a real good connection from east to west, so we'll be talking about that. The blue little dotted line is the new bike path. This is the 1995 Bass Lake Hills specific plan for parks and open space. So we went back to this, and those gray lines are all the sites of the parkways and the open space. You can see the ground, the green outline there, and that gives you some pretty direct information of where we sit. Next, we'll see the circulation plan from the 95 plan. This was done by CTA. Dave Cresorio is on as well if we have some questions on any of this. You can see the dotted line specifically on the Mohana property, and that's where the bike path was going to go. So we wanted to start with the bike paths, the hiking paths, and the connection of equestrian paths throughout the plan. Next, we'll see something very specific, and this is going now just to focus on the bottom 20 acres. We started looking at this and saying, how could we make beautiful connections from the bottom half of the property and the oak grove that's being preserved there. And so you can see on the existing topography of the land, two new trails, an upper pond and a lower pond, and the focus on that one green area. This would be in the specific plan, one of the first non-paved trails as the specific plan calls for in the upper 20-acre portion of the Mohana property, just north of Country Club. And then the blue line shows the hiking path down to the what we fondly call the leprechaun pad, or the oak grove down below. Here are a couple of examples of footbridges we would like to propose across Bass Lake Road. We see that there's very little connectivity between the east side and the west side, and so we'd like to help create that. This is some of the creek side in the north that we're proposing to open up into the trail system as proposed in the specific plan. Some beautiful, it's actually a seasonal creek. And here we're back to that plan again. You can see the park and ride lot that's proposed for 100 cars. You can see upper left-hand corner where we show a proposed bridge, that type of truss bridge. So what we're really looking at is that lower portion of the parcel. This is kind of a bird's eye view of those new walkways up the hillside. You can see the lower pond that we've created. You can see the old wagon trail and the oak in the center, and then the pathway up to the top. Now that brown area down there is right at the corner of Bass Lake and Old Country Club. And so you'll see next some of the view of what kind of structure, the stone, the wood, some concrete. This is the Ahwahnee Hotel. So this is our precedent image of what kind of structure we'd like to have at this location. You can see the timbers, and we have plenty of rock, as we all know, in the hillsides there. So we would use the native rocks, we would use the timbers from El Dorado. And this is a beautiful view of the Ahwahnee dining room. And so one of our 3 floors would have this type of timber and old rustic lodge look. This is a view of a potential of the hotel on the left, and then our public space on the right, with a walkway up to that grove that we've been circling around in the presentation so far. And so as you walk up, you'll go into the oak grove, and now you'll see the actual grove and you can see the freeway in the background. You can see the rock outcroppings in this grove, and this would become a beautiful location for weddings, for family gatherings, as Father Beck tells me, for life celebrations up at the church. And fortunately, we have these connections to the churches all along the side. That's kind of a view of the interior of the Leprechaun Pad. And here's this morning, I went out and took a beautiful photos the sun was circulating in. So that's kind of the background. We've last in January, we focused on the whole of the 60 acres, but we really said through our team, our engineer, Dave Crosario, who's on, our attorney, Craig Sandberg, our whole architectural team, our environmental team, we looked and we said, perhaps, and Michael, if you could get the first slide back up so people could see the site again, perhaps we should look at just that lower 20 acres and see if we could do something beautiful there. So that's the extent of it. I'd like to call on Mr. Mahana if he'd like to say a word or two. We tried to keep it within 5.5 minutes. Dave is also on. Thank you, Dave. And we could go back to any slide. Mr. Mahana, did you want to add a few?
Well, Josh, I think all I can say is I want to thank the advisory committee for spending time and the concerns, and we want to keep our community safe and prosperous and sustainable. Both of my daughters were born and raised in El Dorado Hills for the last 30, 40 years. They went to elementary school there, and then they went to Camarado School and all of that. So we are hoping to be part of the solution. This is a very choice property that is right on Highway 50. We have owned this for about 30, 35 years or so, in addition to the ranch property that we have close by. And we are hoping that we utilize the highest and best use of this property for issues that the community needs. So we have been listening to the community for the last couple of years. We have had several charrettes. We have had meetings with our neighbors, our association, our governmental officials, our DOT, environmental impact report, traffic studies. All these questions that you are raising, they're very valid. How do we create a community that we could be proud of 30, 40, 50 years from now? So I think that's why we took our inspiration from Yosemite Park. We are going to try to utilize the local materials. I think, Josh, with having Dave from CTA, and CTA was the father of some of these plans in 85, then 92, then 95, then the revision. So we just want to be compatible with what is needed, bicycle trail, hiking trails, and then all of these things that we're noticing. People are asking for workforce housing. Prices are getting so out of hand, out of line, that we just need to be imaginative. We have to design such that we can create affordability by design. And so we are here to serve the community. I'm very proud of my family that have had the opportunity and the blessing to be among you. And I think, Josh, that is what we like to do. And CTA would be one of the best engineers to help us accomplish that. Yeah. Thank you.
John Rassa, I'd like to, would you go back to the map before this? Yes. I'd just like to make a couple of comments. First of all, when they redid Bass Lake Road near Country Club Road, their bike lanes were never made to sustain a Class 1, and I don't even think it's a Class 2, okay? And I'm kind of shocked by the DOT putting in a brand new road and not using the land at the time that they're building the road to make a Class 1 or a Class 2. All right. The other thing I want to mention is the old Country Club Road is a total mess. It's all broken up and everything. Who's going to repair that so that it meets your road that you're going to have going through your property? And the road, the bike and pedestrian path going through your property, will it be paved?
Well, thank you, John. First of all, we would maintain that section of the road. And I was just on the bike trail on the Old Country Club, and I agree, it's not being taken care of. And so I was going to talk to Raphael about that and see if we could assist in that to keep it up. You know how it happens if weeds get in the cracks and then the winter comes and then it starts decaying. So I'm going to talk to Raphael about the existing road. Secondly, on that blue piece, as Dave knows, that's where the bike trail was supposed to go. At first, it'll be a all-weather surface, but it won't be paved. But over time, we would look to pave it and bring it up to standard for a Class 1 bike trail as we develop into that site for sure. So we wouldn't do anything until we had the ability to bring bikes across there. As you said in our charrette on Saturday, there is a need for a connection between the east and the west and then over to Silva Valley. So we're trying our best to make that connection. So I hope that answers some of your questions. I agree. What happens on those old roads, they start decaying fast, as you could see. And so we're going to talk to DOT if we can assist in any way to keep that road in good shape for all purposes.
You know, I think the big thing is connectivity, say from Tong Road coming across to your property. Because if I'm a bike rider or a walker, there's no way for me to get to Bass Lake Road except by car from El Dorado Hills.
Yeah, Michael is just showing.
And I know you realize that, but I just wanted to point that out again. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree totally, John. And that was one of our ideas. As you look at that map, that connectivity all the way over to the Silva Valley is important and critical, and we see that. So yes, thank you, John.
Oh, and I was going to clarify for people who are aware of the section of Old Country Club that John's talking about. It's the section that was just closed essentially between Tierra de Dios and Bass Lake Road at the interchange, basically where Country Club used to be.
Maybe Michael could show that with his pointer.
Yeah, it's right there at the bottom and sort of been quiet.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
All the way down. Yes.
Yeah, down there.
Down at the bottom.
I think that's one that John was talking about, that they've just converted to a bike trail, but it's the original Country Club Road surface right now. It's just been barricaded off. So yeah, it was in rough shape before they built the new road. So I can imagine it's a little tough now, a little chewed up. Tim White, you have your hand up. Let's start getting some questions in.
Okay. And, yeah. Again, you know, Josh and Mr. Mahana, on a conceptual basis, this looks really good. But as you know, with every project, the devil's in the details. And, you know, we're going to want to be looking when you're ready to go through planning department and, you know, getting a draft EIR out, which will address all the issues with noise and sound and traffic and environmental and, you know, endangered species, a whole 16 things that a draft EIR covers. But I think I like the process that you're going through, and that you're engaging the community earlier on. You're addressing some of the issues that always come up about bike, you know, Class 1 bike paths and hiking trails and stuff like that. And you're planning your development sort of around those. You're sort of getting those in first and then saying this is where you're going to put your buildings and your residences, as opposed to trying to squeeze them in at the last minute to satisfy some requirement. So I thank you for, getting the community involved early, inviting for community input. And I know, at least individually and also from APAC, we look forward to, working with you in the next 3, 4, 5 years as this process starts going forward.
Well, thank you, Tim. We agree totally. And the hiking, the biking, and the equestrian in this area, this is really a horse country area. So we want to be careful and we want to be respectful of the existing topography of the land. When Mr. Mahana looked at that curvature, and that's just a drainage area there, but we said that's where a pathway should go. And so that's where the pathway is going. Least disturbance of the topography, and then we'll figure out what comes next. So the details are coming. As you saw in January, this is the next edition. We'll have more details. We're hoping to do another planning charrette with neighbors and the whole of the community in May. And then we obviously have Betty January's 90th birthday coming up June 5th. And we want a good showing for that. But the trail system is first and foremost, and that's why we've shown it. And we want to understand how the topography works with our buildings, where that oak grove sits, how far back are we from it, that 1.5 acres of oaks, and then how we orient things to it to keep all of that in first and foremost. So we appreciate your comments.
And Supervisor Heidel, go ahead and unmute yourself. I think you should be good to ask a question.
Thank you. So Josh, would you also explain the concept you have for the workforce housing where the workers it would support, the hotel operation, those kinds, would live on that same campus? I mean, I think people struggle with understanding how that can be practical, but it can. It's the European model, and there are areas like in the city of Davis where some of those things are very preeminent with bike paths, and it's a biking community. It isn't a car community.
Yeah,
So.
yeah, we're looking. Thank you, John. We're looking at all of the Mahana family land. The Mahana family has been in the forefront of affordability by design, and they really have put their money where their mouth is with their own money. And what that means is if there's, say, 60 employees in these 2 hotels, how do we help those employees to be nearby? How do we build affordable type units, perhaps within the 1/4 mile range of this, or in that spot exactly? And so we're exploring all of those types of things, sort of being responsible. If we create 70 jobs at this location through our hotels and through our museum and open space, and perhaps, as I was talking to Dina across the way, an owner across just the other side, she and Raphael, how do we create the spots for folks who are working here to live within a 1/4 mile? So that's what we're exploring. We're exploring all those ideas, and we think it's achievable. It's achievable if we all want it to be achievable. I had this conversation with my sister recently. I said, well, your favorite coffee shop, the gal who's the barista there. And she, yeah. And she said, and I said, well, she's got to live somewhere. And she said, yeah. And so we have to find ways to do that in an affordable way. And the Mohanas have been at the forefront of that. They just finished, and we're not talking about an 11-story project. We're talking about very low, but they just finished micro units. The smallest of those micro units leased up the fastest. And they were still $990 for a beautiful furnished micro unit. And they all went fast. because people who are making $3,000 and $4,000 a month need them. So we're in this. The Mahanas have been here for 45 years. They've been a family of hospitality, and they believe in what we're doing. They believe in the nature, the topography. As you all know, you can been over the ranch side. If you haven't, please call me. I'm just putting my email in for everyone to text me or to call, to send me an email. So we're trying to figure out all those ways that we can help. And we think we have some good ideas. You've seen just a glimpse of the potential of a hotel and a beautiful reception facility, which, John, you said last time would be the first thought out place in the county. It's a gateway. We've talked to the vintners. We're talking to all folks, but we've gotten the best ideas from Kathy, who talked about her canine association. And wouldn't it be nice to have a reception facility, a small room where we could have something to eat? So our best ideas have come from you all in the neighborhood. So we appreciate any of those ideas. That's the view up to the oak pad, the oak grove there, and what we think will be a lovely, lovely place. So we appreciate that, John.
Terry has a question. Her hand is up. So Terry, if you want to unmute yourself and go ahead and ask your question of Josh.
Okay. How do I unmute myself?
Oh, you're unmuted.
Okay, good. So I just have one question, because I didn't learn this until they did the trails at Blackstone. The difference from what the Planning Commission told me was between a hiking and a biking trail or walking trail is one is dirt and one is not. So I would just like to encourage everybody to do some ADA things, because we do have a lot of elderly people here. And I can tell you, in even our community, there are quite a few wheelchairs and stuff. So because we looked at the trail and it looked like it was going to be like a walking trail, which would not be dirt. And turns out that it is a hiking trail, which you can never push a wheelchair up that. And plus, the way that the gates are in here, because they have stairs to get up to the trail, you can't get a wheelchair or anything up there. So I just wanted to throw that out there. When you're thinking about doing all this, think people aren't all walking.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I just brought my neighbor across the street in a wheelchair to his doctor. I agree totally, Terry. We're looking at these pathways. Now, this one up nigh the creek, those are called out in the specific plan as unpaved pathways in the nature area. But we have to find a way that those in wheelchairs can easily access a major piece of it. So we'll look at that, Terry. On the other side, on the historic trail side that Michael may put up, that's all flat and that's all very accessible. That trail down there. Now, what we need to do is we're looking at different types of surfaces in the interim before we build that could be accessed by wheelchairs as well. At first, we thought of gravel, and then we thought, well, a person in a wheelchair is not going to be able to get on gravel. So we're looking at crushed aggregate, things that we find in playgrounds now for young kids in wheelchairs, and see what kind of surface we can do, and as an interim basis before we put down concrete or asphalt.
Okay, thank you. And I wasn't just talking to you either. I was just talking even on the county projects, to think along those kind of lines, because I was really surprised that some of the things don't have to be ADA, because I thought pretty much most things did. So anyway, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Terry.
I was going to go ahead and ask if there's anybody else in the audience that would like to ask any questions or provide any feedback, as I know that's what our guests and I are looking for, is that they want to hear what residents are envisioning here. If there's something that they'd like to contribute. I don't see other hands going up. to do. So there's no hands right now. I will invoke some privilege and ask a question. Josh, I know we talked a little bit, but has your group envisioned a timeline for sort of refining the project, getting it to a point where maybe it's a pre-application and that you can get good feedback from the Board of Supervisors before a formal application is in place?
Yeah, we thought in February, we thought in March, and we keep refining it. And what we're finding, John, is the more people we talk to, the better it gets. And I know that the pre-application is for that process too, but we really do enjoy talking to people. We'd like to host another event out on site. There's some issues with that, with handicap access. So we're trying to decide whether May is a good month to present. And we know it's going to take staff a while to process it and get it to the board. They say that that'll take a little while. So if we were to do it in May, depending on how backlogged the staff is, you know, it might get to the board in a couple months or so after that. So, but we don't want to rush it. You know, as I said, the Mahana family has been here 45 years, and they want to make sure that, you know, we do something. You know, we had talked about housing over by the little trail, and we're thinking, God, is it too much to bite off right now? Is it too much? Should we just focus on, and I'm just talking out loud, should we just focus on a piece that we can comprehend, 14, 15 acres? So it's that balancing, right? So that's what we're talking about. But we are committed to what John said is, how do we, and it's not that we're being forced to do this, but how do we, who create 60 jobs here, permanent jobs, how do we help those employees live nearby? It's one of our questions that we keep going back and back to. So that takes some time. But John, I don't know if you, if that answers it. Hopefully in May, if we could get it to a J6, if we get to a pre-app to the board, they could evaluate it. We could get more public hearings. We've done 3, 4. We're hoping to do 5 or so before even the pre-application. And we really are torn. Dave, I don't know if Dave Rosario wants to weigh in on this, but he was one of the ones who said, well, let's take a small piece that we can, we might be able to accomplish in the near future. And so, Dave, I don't know if you wanted to say a word or two from CTA.
Am I on?
Yeah.
You are.
Okay. Well, what I was saying is that, you know, there's infrastructure issues and everything that we have to deal with, but there's taking a little bit of a smaller bite there. When I'm talking about infrastructure, I'm maybe talking about the El Dorado Irrigation District and, you know, sewer capacities and that sort of thing. And there may be a smaller chunk at the beginning before we get into doing, you know, a sewer line all the way down to El Dorado Hills and all that sort of stuff, those things. But we have to evaluate that. There's just but it's mostly infrastructure stuff than anything else.
Yeah.
So I'll turn it around and see if there's any more attendees that have any questions. Hold on, John, you got your hand up. Go ahead and unmute.
Yeah, and so Josh, I think the other thing, that one view you had that shows tourist recreation, I think it's important to note that the way the county general plan and the zoning exists today is not compatible with this particular vision and the project. It will require rezoning. You've identified the tourist recreational as what you think the best fit is, and I certainly don't disagree with that, but we have to go through the planning department and get their inputs and all those kinds of things. But this is an example, just another example of how things that were done back in 2004 in the general plan are really not consistent with what the desires of the community are today. And that's why that general plan has to be modified periodically to look at changes in land use and changes in zoning to be compatible with the needs. And I've seen that changes from commercial projects to residential projects and vice versa. So the county, in its best effort, always tries to define what are the optimum types of land uses and zoning for each of these parcels that exist throughout the county. But it's never magic. There's always things that will change over time, people's desires, the environmental concerns, all kinds of things that require you to go back and touch up, change some of those things. Some people are against changing anything, whether it's a land use or a rezone. And I don't think that fits the needs of today's community as opposed to somebody who looked at it almost 20 years ago. So I just want to emphasize that this will require a rezone from what is currently zoned.
Yep.
And that's an effort that has to go through the planning process and CEQA and all those things. So.
Yeah, I appreciate it, John. Thank you.
Yep, that's it. Thank you.
Well, seeing no more questions, I'd like to go ahead right now and thank Josh and Mr. Mohana and your team for presenting tonight. This is a much better view. It's much more detailed than we saw last time, and I know we're working our way through what you're envisioning for as part of your process and how this will play out. And of course, anybody who has a project proposed in Dorado Hills, we extend an open invitation for when you have information to share, or if you're looking for feedback, you have an open invitation to return when it's appropriate.
Okay, my email is in the chat, Josh Pane at cwo.com. Please email me, I'll get back to you. If you don't hear back, email me again. I'm gonna put my my phone number. Sometimes you know how email is.
So I don't think the chat is open for all attendees right now, but if you're amenable to it, I can put it into our meeting materials.
Okay, perfect.
And we'll share that on the website.
Okay.
All right, and
Thank
I'll check
you,
with you to
guys.
confirm that's what you want. So.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, well, thank you guys.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you.
So moving along one more time, I'm going to grab this just to show you where we're at in our agenda tonight. So we're going to wrap this up as quickly as we can. We have some updates on planning commission hearings that have happened in the last few months, and specifically where it impacts El Dorado Hills. So I think I said this at the community council meeting on Monday last week, that your planning commission are earning their dollars. Their meetings have been lengthy. I've been pleasantly, I don't want to say surprised, but I've welcomed the degree of questioning and comments that the new planning commissioners have provided, and sort of how the group is functioning. So real quickly, we'll look on February 25th. There was an informational workshop regarding the Bass Lake Regional Park, their pre-app, which when they go to the board and they provide sort of the initial view of what they're proposing, and they get that feedback. They went to the planning commission first. It was a lengthy conversation. There was a lot of back and forth. The planning commissioners did provide a lot of questions, and they provided some comments and recommendations. Right now, I believe that the El Dorado Hills CSD is talking about a pre-app present or a similar workshop presentation to the board. They'd mentioned, I think, May, but I can't confirm that right now. But you'll have an opportunity to see that, because those meetings do get recorded. As part of this plan, some of the things I identified, like from DOT, they had mentioned that, there's a proposal for either a stoplight or a stop sign along along Serrano Parkway, very close to Bass Lake Road, where the shopping center is now. And there's some concern about, the timing between that. The parking facilities on the west side of the lake are proposed for like 500 plus parking spaces. And there's another 140 plus on the east side of the lake. So that's an issue that needs to be addressed. Frontage improvements, the walking trails that would tie into what the El Dorado County Transportation Commission has in their active transportation plan. A lot of elements that have to come together for this. I believe that it was well received by the commissioners. They did provide good feedback, and it was an opportunity for the CSD to present this sort of in a more formal way for the public to see. So that was in February, and like I said, it's supposed to be back to the board soonish. I guess that's a description. In March 11th, that was another long hearing date, but they had a hearing to consider the Oak Ridge High School Verizon. It's a cell tower project, and basically they're talking about there's existing cell tower facilities that are co-location facilities on the west side of the football stadium right now, and those towers on the light standards are taller than the light standards on the other side, on the east side of the stadium. The proposal is to remove those towers, construct 2 new towers, and provide some co-location facilities. And it was an interesting conversation. I was lucky enough to sit through a lot of it, but I don't think the commissioners were that lucky because they it was an all-day event. Basically, I don't know that the applicant was fully prepared to. They didn't. I believe they did not have their tolling agreement in place, and at the end of the day, based on the questions from the commissioners, they weren't getting the answers that they wanted. The clarity to define precisely, what this project was going to entail in terms of the co-location facilities, and they did vote to deny the project. I believe they have applied to appeal the project to the Board of Supervisors, and it sounds like they're just getting their ducks in a row, and that it's the same project. They'll just be much more detailed, and the supervisors can decide on whether that appeal has any merit. So I don't want to spend as much time as the Planning Commission did on it, but it was a long, all-day back and forth conversation that would jump out of it and come back to it based on the availability of what the project applicants' lawyers were available. So it was a tough day for the commissioners on that topic. Also on the 11th, they did receive a presentation from DOT about the traffic demand model for El Dorado County and how the VMT, the new standard, was implemented by the board to respond to the SB Senate Bill 743, where it changed the metric for CEQA in terms of, it's not delay times or level of service now. Their metric is now vehicle miles traveled. So that was a very good presentation. It was basically 2 parts, really, the traffic demand model and then the VMT implementation. It was very long. I would love to have Natalie Porter come and discuss that with us. And I think I said earlier, I don't know that we could fit it into one meeting. It was very detailed, very focused, and it gives you a lot of insight to what DOT is looking at when they're considering the traffic demand model and how roads interact with each other and how alternate transportation folds into it. So it's a long presentation. The video is available as part of the meeting minutes for the Planning Commission for that date. But I would like to have DOT make either one or both of these presentations in future meetings for APAC. So as we review projects, we have to understand, as amateurs, as non-professionals, how they approach it and how they're judging the impacts of development and how they're fitting it into these models and how they're advising applicants what improvements projects are going to have to make based on their impacts. So that was a good presentation at that hearing. On the 25th of March, it was a project that we reviewed and we provided findings from our subcommittee. It was the Montano de El Dorado Phase 1 and 2 Master Plan project, and that's the commercial and retail project that was that's at White Rock Road and Latrobe on the southeast corner. Our subcommittee did a lot of work on this, and we made a lot of recommendations. And John Reslier and Chrissy, I don't see my full list right now, I'd have to scroll. Chrissy both provided public comment in addition to the written findings that we submitted. And I'm trying to grab my notes while we're talking so I can remember. So the Planning Commission spent literally, I want to say about 10 hours on this. It was a long hearing. And I will also remind our audience tonight that the applicant provided a lot of opportunity for APAC to review the project, and he appeared at APAC twice. There were some specific things that we had asked for and for our conditional support. One of the first things I know that they did agree on was the addition of a concrete median along White Rock Road at the limited access driveway, not the stoplight at Post Street. But basically right now it's a right in, right out only, but it's signed. There's no barriers to traffic. And as residents, we've observed, and Chrissy lives in the area, and she's seen that people drive in and out, making left turns across traffic in both directions, really close to the intersection at White Rock and Latrobe all the time. So the applicant realized, that was a deficiency with their project as a result of the project's development, and they agreed right away to, that's something that they should mitigate. So that was one of the mitigations. One of the other mitigations was that the tower, which was sort of a feature focus, it was a proposed 70-foot tower, an architectural tower at the back, on the building at the back of the project, that was closest to the residents. That they agreed to limit the size of the tower to meet, the county standards and get it down to 50 feet. So that was another an item that we had recommended, and they did accommodate that recommendation as part of our conditional support. And the Planning Commission was very engaged in that conversation, talking about things like, the shadow of the building that's on the residents, and sort of the view shed. And those are some things that aren't tangible and that aren't exactly standards of the county, but they did delve deeply into it for a long time. One of the other, there were a lot of things that they reviewed. One of the things that we had a concern about was the proposed amphitheater, where they proposed it's a small amphitheater, but they're proposing some events there, like movie nights in the summer, and maybe some fashion events. Maybe El Dorado Musical Theater can do small presentations there. And they just want it to be an amenity for the overall community, but we suspected that would be a significant impact on the immediate residents that live right behind it. The discussion about the sound standards and how they're measuring it, they did agree that they should be doing their own amplified system and not allow the people scheduling the events or the presenters to bring their own, so that when they do their sound analysis for the first two events to qualify for their conditional use permit, that they're a consistent sound for anybody who comes in. Like if I brought my amplifier there, and I was playing through my amplifier, I can turn it up as much as I want. It's going to be their sound system, and they're going to review it. We still have an issue about the way that noise is reviewed, but it's complying with what the county standards are, and we have a lot of new enforcement officers, and we were hoping that the enforcement officers could be the ones that do the monitoring instead of self-monitoring. They are going to have it monitored by a professional sound study the first two events. If they meet the sound standard of the county, then they're not going to they're going to be able to hold their nighttime events to 7 o'clock, 7 to 7, morning to afternoon. And on movie nights, April through September, they've conditioned it to be allowed up to 10 p.m. at night. So those were some of the items on that. I'm trying to remember if the mitigation plan, they made some changes too. But there were a lot of elements that we had concerned about that were addressed, not all of them. And the Planning Commission did vote 4-1 to recommend approval and pass it along to the Board of Supervisors. And I'm sure they'll be hearing it soon. So, but as I wrap this up, I'll ask and see if anybody, let me finish the Planning Commission part, and then I'll come back to Chrissy or John, see if they want to chime in on that specifically. Okay, that was the last one. So if I'm going to go ahead and stop the share on this. Chrissy or John, if you want to chime in, you put a lot of effort into this, and we appreciate the work you did. And you were the only two public comments that called in during a 10-hour hearing.
Can I jump in now? Okay.
You've never stopped before.
You did something to my picture. It looked like I'm floating. All right. Anyway, first of all, what I would like to mention was the Planning Commission. I have never been in a meeting where they actually covered so much ground and tried to go over all of the things that we put in from the community. That meeting went from 8:30 in the morning till 5:30 p.m. And they did, I've never seen that kind of delving into the specifics, okay? Many of the things were covered that we wanted. And I would like to ask Chrissy. Chrissy lives in that area. Chrissy, how did you feel about the Planning Commission, the hearing?
I agree with you, and I agree with what John Davey said. It was extremely thorough. I was not prepared for that. I thought I would be able to make a comment kid-free, and instead they were both on my back 6 hours later. and I almost felt like my comments were useless because they had already discussed what APAC had sent in, extremely, like I said, thorough. As far as residents, I mean, they are still upset about the amplified music. So that will be a discussion. Someone else in the neighborhood has kind of hopped on board and seems to be scheduling a meeting with the developer where we as residents get to go walk the property. At this point, I think that's just being a good neighbor. There's nothing that we can do as residents at this point, other than making our comments to the board.
Well, part of the conditions of approval is that, that use permit is going to be scheduled to be reviewed by the Planning Commission, I believe in 26 months, so 2 years. And as long as they're still compliant. And the thing that surprised me is that county staff said that they had not received any complaints about noise from Relish Burger or from even the pub when the pub would have small events.
Yeah,
Relish Burger has a permit, but
when you call the sheriff's department, is that not, because I did.
Yeah, that's what I thought too, but they said they had nothing on file. So I would advise residents that, obviously at night you're calling the sheriff because that's who you call. Nobody's going to take that call at the planning department or about a special conditional use permit. Right. So, but you probably want to follow that up saying, hey, I called the sheriff and, we have these concerns. At least it's documented. And then when they come back in that 26-month period, that there's something on file.
Yeah. And I have found the document to make a formal complaint. So
awesome.
I'll just make copies and pass them out.
Yeah. Our concern about the noise was that, it immediately puts residents in conflict with the development and their, essentially their neighbor, making them effectively the monitoring program, which, that's hard to do. It'd be nice if we had professional monitoring that was, at a minimum spot checks, right? Drop in on an event, do some measuring. But I guess that's a discussion for the future, but I appreciate the work that John and Chrissy's neighbors put in forming these concerns and these response. And we did get a very positive response from the Planning Commission.
My last thing that I just want to mention that was sort of discussed at the Planning Commission, but I don't think anything was really nailed down, was just having security on site, either when there is an event or all the time, such as the town center does. I know that falls financially on the developer, but since it is a growing area where he wants to have people hanging about as neighbors, we would appreciate some sort of security, at least during larger events.
Yeah, and I know since you'd be able to have that discussion with him, with neighbors if they walk the property, but he seems to be open to an ongoing dialogue. So just be present. And, if your concerns, share them.
Yeah, agree. Thank you.
So with that, thank you, Planning Commission. I would put you in for a raise, but sorry. And I know that Commissioner Vegna was in the meeting. He's still in, so I won't bug him. I talked to him too much today already. But thank you again for the effort and looking at, not just El Dorado Hills, but the entire county. So the last thing on our agenda tonight, and I'm hoping I can get everybody out of here quick. I know you're already home, but the last thing on the agenda tonight are just some brief updates on some area projects that are ongoing. And the first thing would be the Silver Springs Parkway Southern Connection to Bass Lake Road, which has been going for a while. The northern connection, I have a mouse, I can put it over here. The northern connection ended, I'm looking at the creek, sorry. The northern connection ended about here in 2014 when they built it. The southern connection connects to Bass Lake Road at the infamous 25-mile-an-hour curve. DOT crews, or DOT staff have been working with Granite Construction, who was awarded the contract, and began preparing for this. Bass Lake Road is closed now. Silver Springs Parkway is connected to Bass Lake Road, just north of Madera Way at the entrance to Woodridge. The 25-mile-an-hour curve is disintegrating as I drove past it this afternoon. But the road is closed from that curve up to Magnolia Hills Drive, which is the entrance for the hills of El Dorado. The suggested detour route is to go around, Green Valley Road to the top of Bass Lake Road. If you're at the top, they want you on Silver Springs, and using Silver Springs come around and pass the lake. Can't get through here. And the other part too is like if you live in Woodley or off of Gateway North at Cameron Park, same thing. They want you to go around the top, and when you go back, they want you going the other way as well. If you're far enough to the east, you might want to consider Cambridge, depending where you need to go. But this project started, the closure started yesterday on the 13th, and the work involved was basically closing the road here, paving the last section to connect, so this road would be open. And they're going to be underway for, I believe it's 54 days. It was suggested April 13th through June 11th. But I have talked to DOT several times, and they've also said that, you know, it was originally scheduled to be completed by July 4th. Now they're talking about midsummer, and they believe the only delays that they might experience, and I'm going to jinx it by saying them out loud, would be utility relocation delays from either PG&E or AT&T, who have, you know, pole-mounted facilities in this area, or a weather delay. And so hopefully, you know, we're getting closer to mid-spring, the end of spring, that there won't be any weather delays, because we certainly haven't gotten the rain yet. So, but if you're a motorist in the area, if you have to drive through the area, be advised when you come up. I saw 26 people this morning as I went to go take a photograph, pull up to that barricade, even though there are reader signs all along Bass Lake Road that say the road is closed. And they pulled up to the road closure, and I went, what? And so 26 people turned in on Magnolia Hills Drive in about 3 minutes. So the signs were up for a week. We appreciate them getting them out at least that early. The other item, and I might throw this over to Todd to see if he has any comments, but I'll discuss it real quickly. You know, we reviewed our subcommittee for the White Rock Road noise study report. You know, it had some very detailed findings, and this is primarily residents that live very close along this route about the Southeast Connector Corridor JPA. So we had some concerns. We raised them. That group did a lot of work in raising those concerns and analyzing them. So we did ask after our last meeting got a little sideways with the interruption with Zoom, but we did ask Derek Mamena, the director of the JPA, the executive director of the JPA, if his office or if his staff could provide some written feedback to our comments. And I think I've asked twice, and I know that John has submitted more messages to him. So this is where we stand. You know, we're an advisory committee of residents. We're volunteers. We're not a government agency.
So John, before you leave that, Derek Miniman has been on paternity leave for about the last 2 weeks. So he has a family situation he's got to address first. That's why
I didn't know if we want to share that with anyone, but congratulations to him.
Yeah, exactly. He's got a new
book. But so we haven't heard back from him. And I know that John's going to have some, you know, John will have some feedback on this. You know, my purview on this is this is a project that's scheduled out for many years. My discussion with Mr. Mamena was that, you know, there's no funding right now in terms of how we're going to get this done in terms of the totality of the project. But the concern is that, you know, the noise study is inadequate, specifically for people that have existing walls that are more of property walls and not sound walls. They're, you know, 5 feet tall or 4.5 feet tall. And, you know, what are the solutions? What's possible? Because, you know, they can't get funding to complete the project. And if the sound wall situation is not resolved, then, you know, there's not going to be funding for that either. Our subcommittee felt that the best course was to address it before the project got underway. If there's ways that we can look at funding the sound walls or funding something, some sound mitigation. So John, I know if you got anything you want to chime in, jump right in.
Yes, I do. Regardless of when they think they'll have money to start this section of the road that's in El Dorado County that goes right past Stonebriar, that goes past Four Seasons and goes past other areas. The thing is that when we looked at current conditions and what is being built in Folsom and what is being built all over, the realization is that the sound study that was done does not take into consideration all of these facts. And we have traffic engineers who live in Four Seasons who have studied. There are people in Stonebriar who have studied the old noise abatement, and we have found flaws. And regardless of whether they're going to build 20 years from now, a new study has to be done so that we know what has to be done, okay? According to all of the things that are happening now. I personally find it very hard to believe that because one person is on, I guess you call it paternity leave, that there's no one else in the JPA that can come in and talk to us. We're not asking.
Well, they can come in and talk to you, John.
Wait
They're
a minute,
not gonna have
John.
the depth of knowledge. So if you want somebody
Asking-
that's only got half the information,
No, John, would you please let me finish? We're asking that engineers from the JPA talk to us and talk to our engineers in a meaningful way. That's what we're asking for. I don't even know if Derek, who has a long history about this, can even answer these questions. This has to be done by someone who is an engineer and knows acoustics and knows noise. And I'll leave it at that. We are very disappointed that we're waiting this long. And as I said before, I don't care if it's 40 years out, a new noise study has to be done. And I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you.
So with that, oops, let's see, make sure I'm on the right screen here. Oh, I didn't show you. There's a neat picture supplied by the JPA of what the project will eventually look like. So if there are no questions, I'm trying to look and see if there's any hands coming up. We've covered our topics for tonight. We're trying to keep these meetings under 2 hours. We really want to give people good information, but we don't want to monopolize your time. There's a lot to look at when there's projects. We need help when there are. So if you're interested in contributing by participating in a project study or review, we are not professionals, and we have an idea of what we're doing when we approach projects for review. We're asking questions, and we're just trying to provide responsible, informative questions to applicants in the county to determine, if we can have answers, if our concerns are valid, or if they're addressed, mitigated by something in a project. So if you're interested in working on something, there's a lot of projects coming up, but nothing that has any momentum right now until, more applications are into the county and more actual, EIRs or draft environmental impact reports are filed for some of these projects. When they come, we got to move fast. So if you're interested in participating, our email addresses are on the agenda. You can use our info@edhapac.org. That goes to almost all of us. And if there are no go backs, I think I'm going to go ahead and jump ahead and, oops, there we go. Sorry. Our next meeting is Wednesday, May 12th. We anticipate it will again be virtual, online. There's some question about when we'll be allowed to have public meetings. We don't know about the availability of the El Dorado Hills CSD Pavilion. There might be some restrictions there, and we have some opportunities perhaps with the fire department. It's been very generous with suggesting that they might have some solutions for us. We might have to have meetings that are a hybrid, where it's both virtual and in person. And if you can't attend, but we can continue to provide this virtual environment. But this is work. It's a lot of effort. But the point is obviously, we want to be responsive to our community, and our projects that end up being the best that they can be in terms of what the applicant's trying to achieve and what the community desire is. So if there are no other questions, I'm going to stop this. And I don't see any hands. So I want to thank everyone for coming tonight, and thank you for your patience as we went through a lot of detailed questions. And again, thank you to our guests for attending. So see everybody in May.
Okay, thank you, John.
Good night, everybody, and thank you. Thank you.
Everybody, thank you.